The First World War. Most Canadians were proud to be part of the British Empire. Over 7,000 volunteered to fight in the South African War from 1899 to 1902, popularly known as the Boer War, and over 260 died. In 1900, Canadians took part in the battles of Paardeberg, Horse Mountain, and Lillefontaine, victories that strengthened national pride in Canada. When Germany attacked Belgium and France in 1914 and Britain declared war, Ottawa formed the Canadian Expeditionary Force, later the Canadian Corps. More than 600,000 Canadians served in the war, most of them volunteers, out of a total population of 8 million. On the battlefield, the Canadians proved to be tough, innovative soldiers. Canada shared in the tragedy and triumph of the Western Front. The Canadian Corps captured Vimy Ridge in April 1917, with 10,000 killed or wounded, securing the Canadians' reputation for valor as the shock troops of the British Empire. One Canadian officer said, "It was Canada from the Atlantic to the Pacific on parade. In those few minutes, I witnessed the birth of a nation." April 9th is celebrated as Vimy Day. Regrettably, from 1914 to 1920, Ottawa interned over 8,000 former Austro-Hungarian subjects, mainly Ukrainian men, as enemy aliens in 24 labor camps across Canada, even though Britain advised against the policy. In 1918, under the command of General Sir Arthur Currie, Canada's greatest soldier, the Canadian Corps advanced alongside the French and British Empire troops in the last 100 days. These included the victorious Battle of Amiens on August 8, 1918, which the Germans called the Black Day of the German Army, followed by Arras, Canal du Nord, Cambrai, and Mons. With Germany and Austria's surrender, the war ended in the armistice on November 11, 1918. In total, 60,000 Canadians were killed and 170,000 wounded. The war strengthened both national and imperial pride, particularly in English Canada. Captions: Image of a sergeant, Fort Garry Horse of the Canadian Expeditionary Force in 1916. Image of Sir Arthur Currie, a reserve officer who became Canada's greatest soldier. Image of a cap badge with caption, "Maple Leaf Cap Badge from the First World War." Canada's soldiers began using the maple leaf in the 1850s. Image of the Vimy Memorial with caption, "The Vimy Memorial in France honors those who served and died in the Battle of Vimy Ridge on April 9, 1917, the first British victory of the First World War." Women get the vote. At the time of Confederation, the vote was limited to property-owning adult white males. This was common in most democratic countries at the time. The effort by women to achieve the right to vote is known as the women's suffrage movement. Its founder in Canada was Dr. Emily Stowe, the first Canadian woman to practice medicine in Canada. In 1916, Manitoba became the first province to grant voting rights to women. In 1917, thanks to the leadership of women such as Dr. Stowe and other suffragettes, the federal government of Sir Robert Borden gave women the right to vote in federal elections, first to nurses at the battlefront, then to women who were related to men in active wartime service. In 1918, most Canadian female citizens aged 21 and over were granted the right to vote in federal elections. In 1921, Agnes MacPhail, a farmer and teacher, became the first woman MP. Due to the work of Thérèse Casgrain and others, Quebec granted women the vote in 1940. Image of Agnes MacPhail. Image of a nurse with caption, "More than 3,000 nurses, nicknamed Bluebirds, served in the Royal Canadian Army Medical Corps, 2,500 of them overseas." Canadians remember the sacrifices of our veterans and brave fallen in all wars up to the present day in which Canadians took part, each year on November 11th, Remembrance Day. Canadians wear the red poppy and observe a moment of silence at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month to honor the sacrifices of over 1 million brave men and women who have served and the 110,000 who have given their lives. Canadian Medical Officer Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae composed the poem In Flanders Fields in 1915. It is often recited on Remembrance Day. In Flanders fields the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row that mark our place, and in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. Caption: Images of Canadian soldiers observing Remembrance Day. Of a Remembrance Day poppy. Of a Canadian War veteran. And of scouts holding a Remembrance Day wreath. Between the wars. After the First World War, the British Empire evolved into a free association of states known as the British Commonwealth of Nations. Canada remains a leading member of the Commonwealth to this day, together with other successor states of the Empire such as India, Australia, New Zealand, and several African and Caribbean countries. The Roaring Twenties were boom times with prosperity for businesses and low unemployment. The stock market crash of 1929, however, led to the Great Depression, or the Dirty Thirties. Unemployment reached 27% in 1933, and many businesses were wiped out. Farmers in Western Canada were hit hardest by low grain prices and a terrible drought. There was growing demand for the government to create a social safety net with minimum wages, a standard work week, and programs such as unemployment insurance. The Bank of Canada, a central bank to manage the money supply and bring stability to the financial system, was created in 1934. Immigration dropped, and many refugees were turned away, including Jews trying to flee Nazi Germany in 1939. Caption: Image of Phil Edwards with caption: Phil Edwards was a Canadian track and field champion. Born in British Guyana, he won bronze medals for Canada in the 1928, 1932, and 1936 Olympics, then graduated from McGill University Medical School. He served as a captain in the Canadian Army during the Second World War, and as a Montreal doctor, became an expert in tropical diseases. The D-Day invasion, June 6, 1944. In order to defeat Nazism and fascism, the Allies invaded Nazi-occupied Europe. Canadians took part in the liberation of Italy in 1943 to 1944. In the epic invasion of Normandy in northern France on June 6, 1944, known as D-Day, 15,000 Canadian troops stormed and captured Juno Beach from the German Army, a great national achievement. Approximately 1 in 10 Allied soldiers on D-Day was Canadian. The Canadian Army liberated the Netherlands in 1944 to 1945 and helped force the German surrender of May 8, 1945, bringing to an end 6 years of war in Europe. Caption: Image of painting by Orville Fisher with caption: In the Second World War, the Canadians captured Juno Beach as part of the Allied invasion of Normandy on D-Day, June 6, 1944. The Second World War. The Second World War began in 1939 when Adolf Hitler, the National Socialist Nazi dictator of Germany, invaded Poland and conquered much of Europe. Canada joined with its democratic allies in the fight to defeat tyranny by force of arms. More than 1 million Canadians and Newfoundlanders, at that time Newfoundland was a separate British entity, served in the Second World War, out of a population of 11.5 million. This was a high proportion, and of these, 44,000 were killed. The Canadians fought bravely and suffered losses in the unsuccessful defense of Hong Kong in 1941 from attack by Imperial Japan, and in a failed raid on Nazi-controlled Dieppe on the coast of France in 1942. The Royal Canadian Air Force took part in the Battle of Britain and provided a high proportion of Commonwealth aircrew in bombers and fighter planes over Europe. Moreover, Canada contributed more to the Allied air effort than any other Commonwealth country, with over 130,000 Allied aircrew trained in Canada under the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan. The Royal Canadian Navy saw its finest hour in the Battle of the Atlantic, protecting convoys of merchant ships against German submarines. Canada's merchant navy helped to feed, clothe, and resupply Britain. At the end of the Second World War, Canada had the third largest navy in the world. In the Pacific War, Japan invaded the Aleutian Islands, attacked a lighthouse on Vancouver Island, launched fire balloons over BC and the prairies, and grossly maltreated Canadian prisoners of war captured at Hong Kong. Japan surrendered on August 14, 1945, the end of 4 years of war in the Pacific. Regrettably, the state of war and public opinion in BC led to the forcible relocation of Canadians of Japanese origin by the federal government and the sale of their property without compensation. This occurred even though the military and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police told Ottawa that they posed little danger to Canada. The Government of Canada apologized in 1988 for wartime wrongs and compensated the victims. Modern Canada. Trade and economic growth. Post-war Canada enjoyed record prosperity and material progress. The world's restrictive trading policies in the Depression era were opened up by such treaties as the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, now the World Trade Organization. The discovery of oil in Alberta in 1947 began Canada's modern energy industry. In 1951, for the first time, a majority of Canadians were able to afford adequate food, shelter, and clothing. Between 1945 and 1970, as Canada drew closer to the United States and other trading partners, the country enjoyed one of the strongest economies among industrialized nations. Today, Canadians enjoy one of the world's highest standards of living, maintained by the hard work of Canadians and by trade with other nations, in particular the United States. As prosperity grew, so did the ability to support social assistance programs. The Canada Health Act ensures common elements and a basic standard of coverage. Unemployment insurance, now called employment insurance, was introduced by the federal government in 1940. Old age security was devised as early as 1927, and the Canada and Quebec pension plans in 1965. Publicly funded education is provided by the provinces and territories. Captions. Image of a medical researcher. Image of Toronto with caption, Toronto's business district is also Canada's financial capital. International engagement. Like Australia, New Zealand, and other countries, Canada developed its autonomy gradually with a capacity to make significant contributions internationally. The Cold War began when several liberated countries of Eastern Europe became part of a communist bloc controlled by the Soviet Union under the dictator Joseph Stalin. Canada joined with other democratic countries of the West to form the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, a military alliance, and with the United States in the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD. Canada joined international organizations such as the United Nations, or UN. It participated in the UN operation defending South Korea in the Korean War in 1950 to 1953, with 500 dead and 1,000 wounded. Canada has taken part in numerous UN peacekeeping missions in places as varied as Egypt, Cyprus, and Haiti, as well as in other international security operations such as those in the former Yugoslavia and Afghanistan. Canada and Quebec. French-Canadian society and culture flourished in the post-war years. Quebec experienced an era of rapid change in the 1960s, known as the Quiet Revolution. Many Quebecers sought to separate from Canada. In 1963, Parliament established the Royal Commission on Bilingualism and Biculturalism. This led to the Official Languages Act of 1969, which guarantees French and English services in the federal government across Canada. In 1970, Canada helped found La Francophonie, an international association of French-speaking countries. The movement for Quebec sovereignty gained strength, but was defeated in a referendum in the province in 1980. After much negotiation, in 1982, the Constitution was amended without the agreement of Quebec. Though sovereignty was again defeated in a second referendum in 1995, the autonomy of Quebec within Canada remains a lively topic, part of the dynamic that continues to shape our country. A changing society. As social values changed over more than 50 years, Canada became a more flexible and open society. Many took advantage of expanding secondary and post-secondary educational opportunities, and a growing number of women entered the professional workforce. Most Canadians of Asian descent had in the past been denied the vote in federal and provincial elections. In 1948, the last of these, the Japanese Canadians, gained the right to vote. Aboriginal people were granted the vote in 1960. Today, every citizen over the age of 18 may vote. Canada welcomed thousands of refugees from communist oppression, including about 37,000 who escaped Soviet tyranny in Hungary in 1956. With the communist victory in the Vietnam War in 1975, many Vietnamese fled, including over 50,000 who sought refuge in Canada. The idea of multiculturalism as a result of 19th and 20th century immigration gained a new impetus. By the 1960s, 1/3 of Canadians had origins that were neither British nor French, and took pride in preserving their distinct culture in the Canadian fabric. Today, diversity enriches Canadians' lives, particularly in our cities. Captions. Images of a Vietnamese Canadian parade and of an F-86 Sabre from the Royal Canadian Air Force. Arts and culture in Canada. Canadian artists have a long history of achievement in which Canadians take pride. Artists from all regions reflect and define our culture and forms of creative expression, and have achieved greatness both at home and abroad. Canadians have made significant contributions to literature in English and in French. Novelists, poets, historians, educators, and musicians have had a significant cultural impact. Men and women of letters included Stephen Leacock, Louis Aymon, Sir Charles G.D. Roberts, Pauline Johnson, Émile Nelligan, Robertson Davies, Margaret Lawrence, and Mordecai Richler. Musicians such as Sir Ernest Macmillan and Healy Willan won renown in Canada and abroad. Writers such as Joy Kagawa, Michael Ondaatje, and Rohinton Mistry have diversified Canada's literary experience. In the visual arts, Canada is historically perhaps best known for the Group of Seven, founded in 1920, who developed a style of painting to capture the rugged wilderness landscapes. Emily Carr painted the forests and aboriginal artifacts of the West Coast. Les Automatistes of Quebec were pioneers of modern abstract art in the 1950s, most notably Jean-Paul Riopelle. Quebec's Louis-Philippe Hébert was a celebrated sculptor of historical figures. Kainayuk Achivak pioneered modern Inuit art with etchings, prints, and soapstone sculptures. Canada has a long and respected performing arts history, with a network of regional theatres and world-renowned performing arts companies. The films of Denis Arcand have been popular in Quebec and across the country and have won international awards. Other noteworthy Canadian filmmakers include Norman Jewison and Atta Magoyan. Canadian television has had a popular following. Captions: images of Cirque du Soleil and of Tom Thomson's painting The Jack Pine. Sports have flourished as all provinces and territories have produced amateur and professional star athletes and Olympic medal winners. Basketball was invented by Canadian James Naismith in 1891. Many major league sports boast Canadian talent, and in the national sport of ice hockey, Canadian teams have dominated the world. In 1996, at the Olympic Summer Games, Donovan Bailey became a world record sprinter and double Olympic gold medalist. Chantal Petitclerc became a world champion wheelchair racer and Paralympic gold medalist. One of the greatest hockey players of all time, Wayne Gretzky, played for the Edmonton Oilers from 1979 to 1988. In 1980, Terry Fox, a British Columbian who lost his right leg to cancer at the age of 18, began a cross-country run, the Marathon of Hope, to raise money for cancer research. He became a hero to Canadians. While he did not finish the run and ultimately lost his battle with cancer, his legacy continues through yearly fundraising events in his name. In 1985, fellow British Columbian Rick Hansen circled the globe in a wheelchair to raise funds for spinal cord research. Canadian advances in science and technology are world-renowned and have changed the way the world communicates and does business. Marshall McLuhan and Harold Innis were pioneer thinkers. Science and research in Canada have won international recognition and attracted world-class students, academics, and entrepreneurs engaged in medical research, telecommunications, and other fields. Since 1989, the Canadian Space Agency and Canadian astronauts have participated in space exploration, often using the Canadian-designed and built Canadarm. Gerhard Hertzberg, a refugee from Nazi Germany, John Polanyi, Sidney Altman, Richard E. Taylor, Michael Smith, and Bertram Brockhaus were Nobel Prize-winning scientists. Captions: images of Donovan Bailey, Chantal Petitclerc, Terry Fox, and Wayne Gretzky. Image of Mark Tewksbury with caption, Mark Tewksbury, Olympic gold medalist and prominent activist for gay and lesbian Canadians. Image of Paul Henderson with caption, in 1972, Paul Henderson scored the winning goal for Canada in the Canada-Soviet Summit Series. This goal is often referred to as the goal heard around the world and is still remembered today as an important event in both sports and cultural history. Image of Catriona LeMay Doan with caption, Catriona LeMay Doan carries the flag after winning a gold medal in speed skating at the 2002 Olympic Winter Games. Image of a Canadian football game with caption, Canadian football is a popular game that differs in a number of ways from American football. Professional teams in the Canadian Football League, CFL, compete for the Championship Grey Cup, donated by Lord Grey, the Governor-General, in 1909. Great Canadian Discoveries and Inventions. Canadians have made various discoveries and inventions. Some of the most famous are listed below. Alexander Graham Bell hit on the idea of the telephone at his summer house in Canada. Joseph Armand Bombardier invented the snowmobile, a lightweight winter vehicle. Sir Sanford Fleming invented the worldwide system of standard time zones. Matthew Evans and Henry Woodward together invented the first electric light bulb and later sold the patent to Thomas Edison, who more famously commercialized the light bulb. Reginald Fessenden contributed to the invention of radio, sending the first wireless voice message in the world. Dr. Wilder Penfield was a pioneering brain surgeon at McGill University in Montreal and was known as the greatest living Canadian. Dr. John A. Hopps invented the first cardiac pacemaker, used today to save the lives of people with heart disorders. Spar Aerospace and the National Research Council invented the Canadarm, a robotic arm used in outer space. Mike Lazaradis and Jim Balsillie of Research in Motion, a wireless communications company known for its most famous invention, the BlackBerry. Caption: Image of Canadian scientific innovation at work with Canadarm 2. Image of Sir Frederick Banting with caption: Sir Frederick Banting of Toronto and Charles Best discovered insulin, a hormone to treat diabetes that has saved 16 million lives worldwide. Want to learn more about Canada's history? Visit a museum or national historic site. Through artifacts, works of art, stories, images, and documents, museums explore the diverse events and accomplishments that formed Canada's history. Museums can be found in almost every city and town across Canada. National historic sites are located in all provinces and territories and include such diverse places as battlefields, archaeological sites, buildings, and sacred spaces. To find a museum or national historic site in your community or region, visit the websites of the Virtual Museum of Canada and Parks Canada listed at the end of this guide. The prosperity and diversity of our country depend on all Canadians working together to face challenges of the future. In seeking to become a citizen, you are joining a country that with your active participation will continue to grow and thrive. How will you make your contribution to Canada?